want to record that in case anything came up. But okay, so we are officially recording. And I just wanted to start by saying that we are really lucky this time to have a guest presenter. And I'm really thrilled because I got to meet Elle a couple of times at OER conferences around the state. And she's just got this really wonderful wealth of information. And I just knew I wanted her part of this, these workshops, because it would just be really great. And she has agreed to present for us, so that is super, super wonderful. Elle Demopoulos is the Access Technologist and co-coordinator of the LGBTIQQ Task Force at the College of Marin. So she's out at Marin. She has also worked as a literacy educator, donated her time to various community organizations, involved in healthcare advocacy, and climbed both Mount Fujisan and Gorge du Verdon. I know, right? Many talents. Her current work is focused on the intersection of HCI, which is human-computer interactions. Is that right?
That's right.
Okay, very good. UE, so user experience, which is kind of universal design, building experiences that folks can use well, and I'm totally messing that up, Elle, sorry. And information wayfinding in underrepresented populations. So she's got this really great wealth of different experiences that I think can be really helpful when we're thinking about how to build open resources. So, Elle, at this point, I am going to start sharing, and we're going to go to your PowerPoint. So give me 1 second.
Perfect. Thanks, Suzanne. And I just want to let everybody know that if my voice is a little raspy, it's because I'm a little under the weather, but I'm excited to be here.
Oops, this is not, let me get to the chat 1 second. Oh, come on, up. Okay. That's weird. There it is. Okay. All right, can everyone see the PowerPoint online? Is the PowerPoint showing up online or no?
Yes.
That's it, okay. Perfect. Okay, all you.
Okay, well, this is one of the things I wanted to touch on is the universal design models. I know people sometimes like to get the big picture, and I'm a holistic researcher by nature. So this is some foundational. I'm sure you've already
Sorry.
That's okay. I'm just going to keep rolling. I'm sure you've already touched base on a lot of these materials. I think Suzanne is really great in putting all of these presentations together for our use and developing OER to not only facilitate your instruction but also support student success. So the diagram I've got there is a little meta-learning from the Center for Curriculum Design. It gives you that, standard kind of tripod level approach to learning. And how that ties into universal design is hitting those 3 methods, right? Which I don't know if anyone's familiar, but we'll go over them right now with you. So context is important, right? Context is really key to universal design, not only for instruction, but also for the way you are put in the driver's seat, right? For your classes. It gives you, the one up on curriculum and content, right? So the analogy I always like to use is, why are the students coming to your class? They are wanting to understand and demonstrate their mastery of the material, Um, but what's the difference between your classroom and, say, reading the textbook, right? Or going to a Wikipedia entry? Well, the answer, obviously, is your wonderful selves, right? Faculty, interaction, right? Providing the context for why those concepts are important and how those concepts relate to each other. So going on to the next one, variability, flexibility of material. I'm sure folks who are in the middle of our OER creation process here, I think you'll find that the flexibility you have in what kind of materials you use also gives you that element of control, right? It gives you that freedom to, tweak it and remix it the way you want to use it, right? And so that leads into the clear goals. That to me speaks to your SLOs, right? So if you can get down to the nitty gritty of your learning objectives, then you can really have that flexibility for students to demonstrate that knowledge, right? So whether that be, choosing multiple choice or using a test bank or using long answers or, maybe making it more accessible, and if a student has motor control barriers or cognitive barriers and has some neurodiversity there, you can approach that with, well, maybe you can do an oral exam, or maybe you can speak your answers into a digital recorder and demonstrate knowledge that way. So those are just a little few things how we're going to approach it. You can go to the next slide.
Okay, I'm going to try the presentation again, see if I can get it right.
Okay, so, and this, I think, really ties into our first model, right? Where I'm sure you've seen this before from CAST, which is, the multiple levels of engagement, right? So you have your multiple means of representation, your action and expression, and your engagement. You can...
Next one?
No, go back one. Sorry about that. So for purposeful, motivated learners, you can stimulate interest and motivation for learning. For resourceful, knowledgeable learners, you can present information and content in different ways. And for strategic, goal-directed learners, you can differentiate the ways that students can express what they know. So that's, it ties into how OER can really make that an effective model for you to use in your classroom. Okay, next slide. Thanks, Suzanne.
Mm-hmm.
So I think a lot of times when people think about universal design and accessibility, they get a little bit overwhelmed, right? They're like, "Ooh, I don't know anything about accessibility," or "This seems like a lot of work, and I'm not an expert at this. So, I'm just I might hand it off to one of our experts, and that's great. I think you should use your experts on campus. But speaking to the universal design approach, I think everybody has to have that ownership of this process, right? So, yeah, exactly. From the chat there, thanks, Laura. But they might not know more about multimodal than they think. Appreciate that. So, getting back to the slide here, I think it's when we're looking at OER and for use for zero textbook costs in our classroom, I really simplify it down to two things, right? Is it editable with an open license or isn't, right? So I think a good thing to keep in mind is what tools are needed to read and edit your material, right? Thinking about that from both a faculty-facing modality, right, and a student-facing, right? So what am I as a student? How can I use, what kind of material or device do I use to interact and engage with this material? You know, is it going to be easily accessible in multiple formats, right? I have there HTML, MP3, which is an audio file, EPUB, PDF, online, and Canvas. That also, and I think sometimes people, when they're doing this process, forget about the faculty side of this, right? So if you're getting OER material, how easy is it for you to edit and adapt it into your courses, right? What kind of tools are you going to need? If, let's say, a textbook is only available in a PDF, well, you're going to need software to be able to edit that, right? So thinking about design in a more universal context, right? So not only is it from engaging from an instructional student's point of view, but also how are you going to manipulate, remix, and reuse that material, speaking to the points for flexibility and different modes of transmission, right? And I just wanted to throw out, of course, there's exceptions. You know, you have your readers, you have your ebooks, you have your journals, you have your subsidized textbooks, like a library textbook program if you buy it in a cohort model. There's portals that departments can subsidize. Math is a big one for this. I think so is nursing, where if they want to go zero textbook cost and they still want to use the portal, which speaks to the test banks, that interactivity, they can, the department can subsidize that, right? And, you know, classes with material fees, if they're speaking to something that's required, right? Say for a laboratory class, you need a lab fee for your, you know, safety classes in your lab coat or what have you, or like a calculator, for instance, right? So those are some exceptions to that designation, but in thinking about that, I think that's a good first step, but it's not OER, right? It's not where we want to go. So I think there's a comment in chat from Rob Newman. Do you want to read that out,
Sure.
Suzanne? Or?
Sure. However, MS Word can also be maddening when editing pages intended to be printed. Finding common tools that are good for both editing and reading can be challenged, and yeah, absolutely. In fact, one of our OER books has to be edited in Word just because of issues on their end. And maddening, I think, is a fair way to say that.
Yeah, definitely. And that's why I always trying to make this process and thinking about it as a process, making that easier. You know, when you're evaluating OER, I think it's important to look at how the content is presented, because the barriers you're going to face in reading that and editing that is similar to what a student might face, right? If I only have it available in Word because of the formatting, or it's a locked, unaccessible PDF where all the text is imaged, right? It's not OCR'd, so it's not searchable, and there's no alt tags, there's no alt text. You know, that can be a little maddening as well, right? So I think there's multiple facets that we can think about when we're approaching OER, right? So yeah, and I agree. MS Word can be a little challenging. That's why I like Pressbooks. I know, Suzanne, this is a little plug for you for your, I think, for your next presentation.
Yep.
Yeah, so Pressbooks is pretty good about putting together the formatting so students can download it and use it in multiple formats. So it makes it really easy. Not only does it make it easy on the faculty member to develop that and edit it on the fly, right? Make changes even in the middle of the semester. And it also makes it easier on the student to access wherever they happen to be.
And we will be talking about how to open a Pressbook account and build in Pressbooks next time.
I think that's something to really keep in mind and take a look at. For example, different formats. You can use different platforms, right? Pressbooks is one. If you download an OpenStax textbook, there's a couple ways to edit it, right? You can sign up for their CNX platform and use their front-end portal to edit it. And there's instructions on their blog about how to do that. Or you can just download it as a PDF or an EPUB and edit it yourself. So again, keeping that, how are you going to maintain and sustain that material over time, right? Go ahead and go to the next slide, Suzanne. Okay, so this speaks to, again, the ancillaries that we were talking about, right? The test banks. Looking at reviewing OER from a usability and a design standpoint, I think it's really important. If you look at, has it been reviewed, right? We all know in academia, being peer reviewed is a good signal that it's, it has some quality to it, right? It might not be perfect for your exact class, but at least you can be confident in the material you do pull from, right? Right here on the example, I'm pulling from OpenBC Campus. Those of you online, you could probably pull that up there. This is just a screenshot of their repository, and I like it because there's a lot of easily accessible information there, right? So you can tell if it's adopted, if it's been peer reviewed, if it's accessible, right? So that's something to look out for. Another thing is adoption, right? Reaching out to your colleagues, post to the listserv, ask around. I'm sure when the PLN gets up and running, and I think the listserv that they have started, if you're on the Zero Textbook Costs listserv that they just started, it's a good way to engage and interact with your colleagues. Again, we're heading into the, let's do it right once, and that way we don't have the reduplication of effort, right? So figure out where it's being used. How many times has it been downloaded? I know some of the repositories lists, what are in use, and a lot of our websites that are local to us, either at the College of Marin or at Butte or Chico or at the UC system, they'll say what classes those have been adopted by. So reach out to your community. Again, ancillaries are also a big thing. I think this ties into the adoption. Some instructors might not necessarily think about posting their test banks online, right? But once you develop those resources, I think it's great. So you can put that out there for the community to use. I know we mentioned Merlot at the beginning of this session, so you can look at Merlot. They have some designations and descriptors for if it's been peer reviewed. Again, you can look at OpenBC Campus. Another one to look at is the Open Textbook Library at the University of Minnesota. That's a good resource that lists how many times it's been downloaded, if it's adopted, if it's reviewed, right? So go out there and check your resources. And of course, you can ask whoever your OER lead is on campus or your librarians. They're always a good resource for information finding to get you started on that path. Another thing to really keep in mind also when you're reaching out is ask them what kind of barriers they faced, right? If I'm adopting this textbook for my class and you've taught it one semester, taught it 2 semesters, what did you like about it? What did you decide to change? And that might give you some insight into adapting it for your own classes. Go ahead and move on to the next slide. So here we get into the nitty-gritty part of the presentation. So to me, I know a lot of folks are really, they really like that rubric, right? In education, we really love rubrics, and some of us more than others. But I think access is more than a checklist, right? It speaks to how, the entire instructional experience is designed. Now, that doesn't mean that there isn't things that you can't make sure of when you're going down your course creation and you're going down a list to say, oh, I want to make sure these top 5 things are going to be set and ready to go. I know all of us who are in the accessibility world, the first thing we say, if it's not captions, it's headings. Please use headings. It makes it so much easier for your accessibility department, your instructional designers, your students to use. So right there, I have an interesting little graphic about how you can use headings.
Sorry.
Oh, go back there. There you go. In your Canvas. So that's a display about, hey, this is a heading 1, heading 2, heading 3. Heading 1 in Canvas is always the title. So the content in your text box should start with heading 2, and then obviously move down from there. There should only be one heading 1, except for some really rare exceptions. So you don't really have to worry about that when you're looking at creating OER, even in a PDF or a PDF format for textbooks, or building that into your course shell in Canvas. Did you want to touch on anything about that, Suzanne?
No, actually, the only maybe thing that I would mention is the temptation sometimes is to either use headings as a way to change the size of things, not a good idea, or
right.
to make something bold and assume that's a heading, which is also not a good idea.
Right. I think that's a good thing to keep in mind. Headings are all about course navigation. You can think about it like a table of contents, right? Where, or for us English folks, if you're doing the tower method of essay creation, you have your scaffolding, right? You have your thesis, your supporting paragraphs, and then your conclusion, right? So it's for course navigation and also your information navigation, right? So that only does not apply to Canvas. I know a lot of folks, and we can get into a little bit more into how headings work in a more in-depth way in another presentation, and I'm sure you'll be able to find those resources. Do you have have you already covered that in one of your presentations, Suzanne?
Nope, not yet.
Okay. There's some resources, and I'll get to one on the next slide here, but we'll get to that. But you can also use headings in Word, right? So when you're out there saving as PDF to upload to your Canvas shell, please make sure you use headings in the Word document. That makes your PDF exported file a lot more accessible.
And actually, maybe just one other point, because this has come up when we've talked about how to build accessible Word documents, is Word's headings are really ugly. There's ways to make them look the way you want to make them look, so it's doable and it's not that hard. So if that's a kind of sticking point, I can show you how to fix that.
Right, and you know, this presentation is more about the broad overview of accessibility and how that relates to OER. If you want to take a webinar or get some more information about, you know, how to use headings more effectively and some hands-on, you can either reach out to me or I can point you to some more in-depth resources. But it's probably beyond the scope of this presentation.
Yeah. And actually, sorry, Rachel, you had a comment?
Oh, I just like Google Docs a lot better than Word as far as importing stuff into Canvas, because it does it right for it should do it right for you, and it looks almost the same.
Oh, I didn't know that. So Google Docs imports into Canvas better than Word does, huh?
If you, just copy it, and then the headings, like the way it's laid out, is almost exactly the same.
Yeah.
So it's just really easy to copy and paste, and then I just usually double check it.
Do you have to use the heading function in Google Docs?
Yeah.
Like you would in Word?
Yeah, but it's way easier than I think using it in Word. It's just like exactly like Canvas. It's just a click down.
And it's not just bolding. Like if I use Word, okay. This
Yeah,
is not a practice I have at all.
Bolding does
Or
not
anyone
put
in my
headings
department,
make.
as far as I know. So it's,
Yeah.
you know, I mean, I know how to do it on Canvas, but I didn't realize that what Ella is suggesting, I think, is really the smart workflow, is to make sure that any content that we're generating for classrooms has the headings, and then it can come into Canvas that way.
Yep.
I guess I just want to be out as someone who doesn't have that kind of practice at all.
Yeah.
So thinking about doing that, I was like, oh God, one more thing.
It's actually, and we can talk about the kind of details of that. It's not as hard as it seems. But yeah, it does take some time it always does to go back and fix something than to do it right the first time. So kind of this point forward, yeah. But yeah, me too. It took me, and there's a few of my documents that aren't there yet. Okay, sorry, I'll carry on.
No, I love the interactivity. I think that's a great point. Usually when I'm creating content, especially for Canvas, I have two windows open side by side, and one's, you know, Google Docs or an HTML editor, and then the other is the Canvas shell, right? So that way I can just cut, copy, and paste after I'm created my document in Google Docs and put it into my Canvas shell. And it imports a lot nicer just because Google is more adhering to the HTML5 standards, right? Microsoft Word has its own closed system of, you know, Microsoft Wordisms, I like to call them. So it likes to lay out things in a particular way for Microsoft Word. So that's a great tip if you want to make a lot of content you're going to be doing a lot of content generation in Canvas, is to make it in a format to start with that's going to be more accessible. And I think James had a comment. Word and Acrobat both have accessibility checkers and wizards that can help a lot with headers. Yeah, that's exactly right. Thanks, James. Yeah, I think the Word is a little less helpful than, it's very basic as far as the accessibility wizard, but depending on what version of Acrobat you have, if you have one of the pro versions, that's not the cloud version, that accessibility wizard is pretty good, and it'll walk you through, you know, setting the language for your PDF, OCRing if it hasn't been done already, putting your tags, and making sure that all your images have alternate description or alt text, right? And that gets me to the next point, alt text. If you're using images and any kind of multimedia in your content, please use alternative text, because that tells the screen reader if a student is using a screen reader or any type of other assistive technology, how to interpret that particular piece of data, right, or that information. And how to do alt text effectively, again, is beyond the scope of this presentation, but I'll just go over a couple of basics for you. Just like in universal design, going back to that type of design thinking, alt text is about context, right? If the alt text and the image you're displaying is content related and specific, it gives you some information about what we're talking about, then you can be short and sweet and just put in what the image is about, what it's describing, what is it doing, right? Think about the image as an action, right? What is its function, right? Because a lot of our assistive technology, it doesn't allow the user to skip the alt text. So if you have a really long description, it won't allow the user to navigate that effectively. So short, sweet, and simple is always the key there. There are some alt tags that you can add additional description to. It depends on what kind of technology you're using, if that description field is going to be read out or not. So it's always best if it's critical to the understanding of the concept, put a little caption at the bottom describing what it is, or go into that at the bottom or before the image, right? So it's just another way to reinforce that concept. On the other hand, if it's just the logo, you can just say, you know, Butte logo, right? Or OER logo. And that's good enough for the alt text because it's not being used, its action is not being used as informative text, right? It's not part of the instructional content. So, yes. Did you want to add something, Suzanne? Jump in there?
Yeah, sorry. Okay, just because I learned something the other day that I just want to share about alt text, because I teach biology, right? And so we have these huge, complicated diagrams about how proteins are made in the cell, and it's a whole page. And I thought, well, you know, people really need, if you can't see it, you have to understand all of it. So I had this beautifully crafted 3 paragraphs that I put in the alt text.
Right.
And so I recently learned a better way to do that because I still want that available.
Exactly.
Our DSPS person said, well, why not share that with all the students? So now I have it set aside as kind of a little, you know, its own little box that explains it to, and so now everybody benefits, which I thought was kind of a nice thing.
Yeah, I think we have a question.
Well, I just, it actually has to do with hardware purchasing and things of that nature. We recently got in some really spiffy new printers, and they're just wonderful. You can scan and email and all this other thing, but when you scan, it does not scan to OCR. And people out when they go up there to scan things, they say, this is not OCR readable. So I think it's rather interesting that when we do those kinds of purchasing, that we should take those things into consideration and not, you know, get something that is essentially not valuable to everyone.
Right. Okay. Fortunately, Adobe does have the OCR capability to at least fix it. I mean, it would be nice if it was on the front end and you didn't have to do that separate step. But the Acrobat Pro will do that. So at least we can get there. Yeah.
Is that with most of our copy machines on campus?
Well, the really big, I don't know what building you're in.
I'm in the
LRC.
Yeah.
Well, the big black ones that they have in the offices now.
Yeah.
Yeah, those just, the scan cannot scan those yet.
It's like really specialized software.
But Adobe will do it. It'll fix it.
I think we can still send those things to our Chris and Dave, and they will do it for us. It's my understanding that.
They can, or we can at some point. It would take me like just 5 minutes to show you at some point if you're interested. It's really easy. It's like 2 buttons. I don't know how good it is. I mean, you still have to go back and fix it, but it's at least a starting point.
Yeah, I think that's a great point to raise. That's getting into the um, ownership, right? And holding our vendors accountable to adhering to a VPAT, for universal design, right? Thinking about design as a process that everybody can get access to. And James said, yeah, it's very good. The Adobe Pro OCR, exactly. Yeah, I would stay away from the cloud version at the moment for at least the Adobe Acrobat side. They're still working out some bugs with the tags. So that's just a quick heads up. Yeah, and I think that's a good segue about the idea of having a alternative little text box or a little script or a caption that goes along with a complicated image or a diagram, right? I know folks in STEM fields, often things are explained in a very visual manner, and that's key to understanding the concept. But there might be just a little blurb at the bottom of it, right? So if you're using that with a screen reader or assistive technology, you're not going to be able to interact with that piece of instructional material. So having that auxiliary right there handy is great, and that kind of gets into the multimodal presentation of captions, right? So you're basically captioning your diagram, right, or your image. So if you're having any kind of multimedia, people always think about captions in a, does a video have captions, right? But that also applies to any complex visual media, right? So an image, a diagram, a chart, interactive model, right? And thinking about that in that way, that's more of a broader design thinking way of approaching it, right? And that also leads into the situational barriers for access, right? So when we're talking about universal design is contextual and flexible, I listed here a couple of the barriers. A lot of these can be situated under situational, right? So for instance, if you're at an airport and obviously you can't hear the dialogue that's happening on the TV, but you have the captions there, right? Maybe you're tired or you're in a library and you want to access that media. Well, you're going to need to turn those captions on, right? Another example of situational barriers to instructional material is if you're part of an aging population, right? So having that caption is going to make it more effective for you when you're trying to learn complicated and really dense content, right? I know if I'm tired, I have to put the captions on because maybe, my brain isn't processing at the end of the day at full speed, at least when I've, skipped my 2 cups of coffee. Trying to go back to tea, but I'll let you know how it goes. I think that looking at that as a situational model for in the socially constructed form of barriers to access to content or material or just the design of something, right? Speaking universally to the design of not only the digital space, but the physical space. I know I wanted to mention we are renovating our library because we're renovating the entire building that we're in after many, many years. And one of the things that we were thinking about was rethinking the necessity for full height shelving in libraries, right? So if you make the stacks a little shorter in libraries, it opens up the community and the building and the space considerably, right? Not only is that a design element that you can think about, but it also helps folks who have mobility issues, right? You know, you don't have to reach as high, and it just gives that nice sense of community and kind of an open floor plan to use HGTV speak. Does anybody have any questions before we kind of move on to the next slide or comments? Okay, moving on.
Oh, next slide.
Yeah, next slide.
Whoops, too far.
Okay, as a HCI human factors person, you know, this is one of my favorite buttons and favorite phrases. So if the user can't find it, the function's not there, right? And that can really apply to instructional content. If your student can't find it or it's not easily accessible, it might as well not be there, right? Again, you're going back to Suzanne's example of a really nicely crafted long description for her alt text, and you know, if they can't find it, then it's not there, right? So we're going to touch a little bit on the automated tools. When you're reviewing OER for accessibility, as well as your courses in a larger context, there are some automated tools available, right? You have the Wave toolbar, you have Tenon at tenon.io. I know if you're in the community college system, for those of you who aren't in the system online, we have Equidocs, you know, to do some PDF remediation. We also have Compliance Chef and a couple of other tools from the CCC accessibility folks. I just want to give them a quick plug out there. They're doing great work. So those are some automated tools you can use along with things like the Word Accessibility Wizard and Checker and the Acrobat Accessibility Wizard. Those are good first steps, but they don't substitute for human interaction, right? That human experience, and that's kind of speaking to that user experience, right? So while it's a good first step, I think that since access is more than just going down a checklist, you really have to get down into, you know, trying it for yourself. So with that, we're going to go to our interactive portion. How many of you in the room have laptops out there?
I think everybody, almost.
All right. So we're going to try a little experiment here, and we're going to ask you to go to the first headers and IMG, which stands for image in HTML. We're going to go to a bookmarklet. So go ahead and hit that tiny URL and pull that up.
So if you're in the room, you can just do the tinyurl.com/OER headers.
Mm-hmm. And feel free for those of you playing the home game out there in the internet, feel free to go along with us as well.
Should I go there as well for demo purposes?
Yeah, if you like.
Okay.
That sounds great. So you'll see this page pop up for bookmarklets, and bookmarklets are just bookmarks that actually change the way the page is displayed, right? So these bookmarklets actually work without making them a bookmark. If you click on, for example, the headings, you'll see, and if you scroll up a little bit, you'll see that the page, it'll list the headings there. So you'll see it's at H1, H2, right? So that gives you an idea about how headers and headings are used to navigate and create the content on either your website or your Canvas, or taking that concept a little further, even in something like an EPUB, right? Or an electronic text.
How do you get that to apply to the text though? I only see, when I hit headings, it's only lighting up the headings on the tiny URL page.
So and since I just learned this all, can I show since I'm driving?
Yeah, go right ahead.
Because this took me a while. So here's
Right?
how I figured this out. So when you click on headings,
Yeah.
keep it clicked and drag it to your,
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
and then when you go to, did y'all see that online too? And when you go to a new site, so let's say here's our new site. If I now click on this, where it says headings, rather than taking me to a new page, it'll actually show the headings. Slick. So I've actually got all these bookmarked here, so I can also do, if I did like landmarks. So the bookmarks are all there. Makes it easy.
Well, can you give us some examples of how students use this functionally, like at Marin, for students that you know?
Well, we use it more on the instructional design side.
I see.
It's a way you can test your own content about how is it displaying and how users would navigate it, right? So you won't be able to see the code normally. That's why you have, if you, again, as Suzanne so expertly demonstrated, if you right-click and hit save as a bookmark or drag it to your bookmarks toolbar, you can apply those bookmarklet actions to any website, right? So you can use it in your Canvas shell. You could use it on Pressbooks. You could use it on, say you're evaluating an HTML book, right? You're going out there, you're looking for OER, and you're navigating onto it through an online book. Well, you can use these bookmarklets to be like, oh, here are the headers, right? It's laid out correctly, and oh, I don't have to worry about redoing it or adding the accessibility features into it already because it's already there, right? Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome. And then, of course, there's other settings that you can navigate through this page, and you can explore the different varieties like lists, forms, landmarks. The really two big issues that you're going to come across when you're evaluating OER, because a lot of OER, I'm sure you'll find, is HTML pages, right? Web pages or books in HTML format, right? How many of you out there are using OER resources, either pulling from a website or using a textbook straight through a web browser?
I think a few of us are.
Right. So this is just a good way to figure out how those settings are going to be displayed for accessibility. Because if those headings and those images aren't coded for accessibility, then that's more work for you to do, to adapt them for your own use, right?
And actually, even for those that might be using like publisher links and kind of online, any online resource, I would imagine this would be helpful for.
Sure.
Question?
No, I have a question for
On
for
yours?
the website, like for the page. My toolbar is all folded. Do you know how to get it, the headings up here?
Yeah, you can create a folder, and I can show you that.
Okay.
It's nice to have kind of nested folders for your toolbar up there. And for those, maybe I will show you. So if the question was, the toolbar is getting really full, and that's a lot of them. So to create a folder up here, you right-click, add folder, and then you can call it whatever, new folder, and then just drag everything into there, and it won't take up so much room.
Perfect. Thanks, Suzanne. So now we're gonna if there's no more questions, we'll move on to another cool tool, and this is more just for your experience, to give you an insight into how screen readers work. This is not necessarily something that you would use on a daily basis. This is just more of an experiential learning tool, right? So if you want to head over to the tiny URL for Screen Curtain, or tinyurl.com/OER-curtain, you can pull that up. And that's going to require you to put it on your toolbar, right? So if you have any issues or questions for that, you can either play around with that, or you can ask Suzanne and I for help.
So this is the same thing. You'd click on this and then drag it up to your...
Exactly.
And I think I have it here. Yep. Do you want me to press on this? Because I got really lost after. Will you get me unlost if I press on it?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay.
So we're gonna all get into this together. So go ahead and click on it. So that is what a screen reader user will see if they're non-sighted, right? So the importance of headers is, if you're using a screen reader, you can move up and down and navigate those levels of information, those nested levels, right? And with a lot greater of ease. And this also speaks to the alt text, right? If you can't see the image, right? If you can't find it, it's not there. So this gives you an idea about how screen readers will interface with the web, right? And how tools could be used to navigate a website. So if you, and we'll come back to this in a second, if you hold down your Shift and Escape key, that should cancel the screen curtain.
It's not working. It's not letting me. Shift Escape.
Yeah.
Nope.
You might be able to close the tab.
Okay.
There you go. So if you get locked in, you can just go ahead and close your tab, and it'll reset it.
You had me worried for a second.
No worries here, right? But again, it's more of an experiential learning tool for you to think about how different users access information in multiple ways, right? So this is why you would use headers. People always ask me, oh, why would we want to use headers? Well, there's a great example of why you can use headers and headings, is so that when you are interacting with your information using either a screen reader or any type of other assistive technology, right? You can scroll through that information effectively and quickly. Another way to come at that is if you don't have a display. Maybe your display is broken or the sun is washing it out, right? You can use headers to quickly navigate through keyboard shortcuts through that content and have your device read it out to you. So that's another way you can think about how universal design and situational barriers to access can come into play. Any questions or comments about that activity?
I actually have a question about that. So when we do the screen curtain, what would we press to read the headers? Do you have to have special software installed to do that?
Right, and that could, you're setting me up perfectly, Suzanne. We're going to, and this is at your leisure, obviously, those of you following along at home. We're going to open up a free screen reader called Non-Visual Desktop Access, or NVDA, and that's going to install a screen reader so we can have a sense of how that actually works with our content.
So that's under the first free resources, right? Go to that tiny URL.
Go to that tiny URL, and I would suggest before you download it, lowering your volume, because there's some audio components to this install. So if you go to that site, nvaccess.org, if you want the full URL, you want to hit the download button. There's a couple ways you can access it. Scroll down, and then if you hit skip donation at this time, you can choose to put in your email address, and then keep me updated if you want to be on their mailing list or not, and then hit download. So yeah, you have to put in something. So that'll download it to your system. The good thing about this NVDA is it doesn't require administration privileges for a machine, because you can install it as a portable version, right?
Other screen readers will require administration of whatever you just said?
Right. If you're installing for something like Kurzweil 3000 or Read and Write or Dolphin or any other screen readers that are out there, most of them will require you to have administration privileges to install onto your machine. Not so much a worry on your home machine or your laptop if you're either a faculty or a student, but if you're installing it somewhere or you're interacting with a machine in the lab or the library, that can be a concern, right?
And for the Butte folks, I should mention, we have a site license for Kurzweil, so if you want that on your computer, it's just an IT ticket away, and you can play with that that program. Okay, so should I press run or should I not, do you think?
Just hit cancel, because we've already installed it.
Okay. And somewhere it's going to ask for the mobile version, right?
Right, so once it pops up, it'll say, hey, please accept this user agreement. And the thing you want to check is install the portable version or portable copy. And if you're on a Mac, VoiceOver is pretty good. So there's also screen reader tools for Mac, but that's beyond the scope of this presentation. But if you want to get some tips or some insight into screen readers writ large, feel free to reach out to me or your local accessibility folks, and I'm sure that I'll be happy to help in that regard. How's everybody doing?
I think so. There's lots and lots of all around questions.
Yes.
Questions online? No.
So it's going to ask you to install in any directory. I usually just put it in the temp directory. Since it's a portable version, it doesn't actually install to your system. It just creates a temporary portable copy. If you want it to install on your system, feel free to do so. But it will start up the next time you boot up. So your computer will start talking to you. So that might be a little bit of a shock if you're not used to that type of output.
And you can you stop it at any time, play it and stop it at any time?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you'll have to go into the toolbar and mute it.
I see.
So I think just to, if I can check to make sure I've got it right. So under the icons in the toolbar, it should show up. And I hit exit, is that?
Yeah, you right click on it. It's going to be a purple icon. And why don't we load that up in Susan, and then we'll kind of go from there.
Okay,
So,
before I do that, there was a question.
It created like a lot of icons on my desktop. I saved it on desktop.
Cool.
All of those?
Wow.
All those like over here, like
Okay, so you must have saved the thing to your desktop. I would just delete them and then, or create a folder and drag them all into a folder.
mm-hmm. If you have a lot of icons on your desktop, a good way to navigate is to single click on your desktop and then hit the first letter of whatever you're trying to find, and it'll jump to that letter. For instance, in VDA, you'd hit the N key and it jumps around to all the icons or shortcuts that have N in the start with N.
Okay, so let's see if I can remember this. So it was under my computer hard drive.
Yep, reinstalled it to the temp drive. So,
and then there's the temp drive. And scroll down to N, first one.
Yep.
Okay. Okay. So now he's going to stop talking, or should I click?
NVDA. Please wait. Video layouts window. Video frame WND.
So if you scroll down to the taskbar, it'll show up.
Running applications.
So
Noted NVDA. Running application. Note NVDA.
Oh, I see. So whatever I click on, he's reading.
Yeah, whatever you click on, it'll read it out to you.
Issues. 2 messages.
Ah,
Nice.
just wondering. Okay.
Can you go to a website for a minute?
Yeah.
Yeah, why don't you pull up a website?
NVN May doc video.
All right, just a minute. Okay. Sorry. Yes?
NV Access Banner landmark visited link heading clickable level 1 NV Access empowering lives through non-visual access to technology navigation landmark list with 8 items visited link home collapsed submenu link about visited link download link get
So
mail
it's-
link
Oh, can you
services
slow it down and
run
speed it up?
notifications run
Yeah, you can.
NV.
Good heavens.
So if you just want to exit out, Suzanne, for the sake of the presentation.
Yeah.
So you'll notice that it has quite a rapid speech output. You can actually slow down that speed and adjust the pitch. It's using what's called eSpeak, right? And that's a synthesizer. You can also buy more human sounding voices that are add-on packs to that, and they're pretty reasonable. They're about $50-$60, and you can have those as an add-on, and they're a little bit nicer sounding, but they're a lot slower. And as you might have imagined, if you're scrolling through a lot of content auditorily, you want to be able to pick up that information quickly and effectively. As you're navigating around on your own using that, I'm sure you'll scroll across a website that has header 1 or navigation list 1 or IMG, and then it'll read out the alt text. That's why it's important, right? So when you're navigating that type of content, you can access that effectively. For example, if you go to our next page, which is on the next slide here.
Accessibility tools.
Oh no, hold on.
Yeah, I think you have it.
It's still on.
Yeah, it's still on.
Accessibility to notification. NVDA. Exit NV. Microsoft out. Okay. Okay. Accessibility.
There you go.
Woohoo. Okay.
Just before we go to the next slide, if you want to learn more about screen readers, Stanford has a great small, concise screen cap, and they have links to YouTube videos and how do you use screen readers in a more in-depth capacity if you have any other interest in that type of technology. So if you want to go to the next slide. This is more of a slide about thinking about things going into the future here. If you pull up the diagram center, there's the tiny URL. This will give you a good intro in creating accessible EPUB 3 files, which is going to be, I think, the standard format for digital textbooks, because as great as PDF is, it's unwieldy sometimes. That's I'm trying to be as nice as possible here, and it's not necessarily an open format, right? So EPUB is more accessible. It's an open format. When we're talking about open and universally designed applications, we're also talking about the formats that we're using, right? How easy is it to edit, right? If I wanted to edit an EPUB, all I would need is maybe a Pressbook account, or there are a ton of free editors that are available online that you could use. Obviously, that's a little bit more accessible than paying for Adobe Acrobat, right? So just thinking about things in a open license, open source type of model that really connects quite well to universal design. So if we're thinking about this website, right, and we have NVDA installed, you can choose to navigate that here at a later date with NVDA if you don't want it speaking out all the text out at you for the moment, and you engage the screen curtain, you can navigate down all of this list by just hitting the down arrow key on your keyboard, right? Because all of these headings are set up in a nested fashion, right? So H1, H2, H3, so that'll be easy to navigate that website, even if you can't see the material on the screen. So getting back to the presentation slide.
Okay.
So that's just a little bit about accessing things from a universal design context and thinking about it more in a holistic, how things are all fitting together, looking at OER as, supporting student success, but also supporting instructor and faculty success, right? Because how easy is it for you to adopt those materials? How easy is it for you to read and assess those materials effectively, right? And how easy is it for you to remix those materials to suit your own courses, right? If I have a textbook that I put on Merlot or Open Textbook Library, and it's available in HTML, it's available in PDF, and it's available in EPUB, well, I can go out there and download the HTML or the EPUB and easily edit that material without needing to buy any closed-sourced expensive software. So thinking about that in a little bit more open context, right? And as a student, I might not have access to that software either. If I want to remix and change that material to suit my study skill strategy, right? If I want to take the textbook material and chunk it up a little, right? So break it down into smaller chunks so I can more easily process it. If it's in an open, editable format, I can do that without any other additional software or restrictions. So that meets my goals as a student, right? Getting the content displayed in that, using that flexibility to really engage with the material, right? So I think there's both sides to that issue. Is there any questions? This is where we get to the Q&A part for assessing OER and accessibility in general. Any burning questions out there?
It's pretty detailed.
I know there was a lot, right?
You covered in depth. Like I just could follow you very easily.
Any questions online? Okay. Well, if questions come up, Ella's going to hang with us for the rest of the time, so for the next half hour. So if questions come up, please just ask them while we have her here. So even if we're on to something entirely different and something comes up in your mind, we're really fortunate to have her here today, so make use of
I think one thing that you mentioned was providing us a list of resources where we can go and kind of self-study. Is there any really good place? I mean, I've seen Penn State has a good place, University of Washington. Are there other accessibility websites that you'd recommend us playing around with?
I do. I mean, I think you hit on two of the most useful sites out there. And thinking about this, you know, not just thinking in an OER context, right? Because really, when you're thinking about assessing OER for accessibility, you're really thinking about, you know, designing your course, your instruction, your pedagogy in a more universally designed, open, and accessible way, right? So it's more broader than just looking at the instructional material. In a sense, you're looking at the entire design of a course as being open and accessible, right? So, you know, a lot of the resources that you're going to find to assess accessibility and give you some guidelines about that are going to be similar in, you know, how to address instructional content, right? So textbooks and the HTML files and websites and movies and YouTube videos. Speaking to your question about resources, I'll give a little plug to my home campus, University of Washington. I'm doing some research up there on HCI and Accessible Knowledge Organization. The You Do It Lab is very, very well respected for, you know, being on the forefront of accessibility. They've got a lot of resources, webinars, they've got videos, they've got multiple formats that you can choose from depending on your need and the way you like to learn and ingest that information. Another really good site is, or search strategy is looking at your LibGuides, right? Talking to your librarians. You know, if you do a search for accessibility in some of the LibGuides that are out there, there's some pretty good resources that are listed in LibGuides at, you know, a lot of the community colleges here, but also at some of the CSUs and the UCs, as well as at places like in Georgia, Stanford, Penn State, Minnesota, to name a few. If you want a good list of accessibility resources, you can just email me and I can send you out a curated list. That's not an issue. And then Suzanne can then post that going forward.
That'd be nice. Could you send me that list, and I'm going to put it in the Canvas shell for this. Is that okay?
Yeah, it's perfect. No worries.
Thank you.
Suzanne, I don't know if this question is for now or it's a later thing because it's kind of logistical, so I'll just ask it and then probably answer later. At the University of Minnesota, they have several texts on writing that may work to use with my English 2 online class. Logistically, if they're not giving me a PDF option, and I found one that isn't, it's only giving me a web option, I embed that somehow in Canvas, and then also somehow I give the bookstore a choice to print.
I can work with you on that.
Okay.
That's what we run into with our book.
Yeah.
If it's only a web option, because we do recommend that we have a print option for those that want it.
Yeah.
Essentially, it's a print the thing as a PDF, like you can print web pages as PDF, convert to Word, clean it up, convert back to PDF. So you and I will we'll figure it out.
But I can also embed it in Canvas, so people can
yes.
choose not to.
Yes.
Is there a tool to do that?
There is.
Okay. I also am going to need that piece, so
Yeah.
we'll do all that later.
Yeah. There's a few ways to do it, but yes, we'll find there may be an easier way than my big dance around there.
Okay.
Other okay, so I did since we have a few more minutes, I did want to kind of show folks a couple of resources that we have because we're part of California, and Elle, if you have stuff to add about these, that's great. But one of these is 3C Media, which is a place where, let me back up. So usually if you make videos for your class, right, you have to have those videos captioned. The really nice thing is the state currently has a grant that'll do that for us. And it used to be we had to go through folks on campus. It was a big old mess. This, super awesome. So 3C Media, and then you want to log in. And I've got all sorts of stuff on my screen, so give me a second to figure this out.
So we got to sign in or register.
Oh, there it is.
Registration's free.
Registration's free. Sign in with your college account because that's linked to the free resources that we have. So make sure you use your school account. And this is statewide, so this is for anybody. Oh, I'm already logged in. Okay. And under media, maybe, there it is. You can upload files. So here it is, add upload files. So just like you would upload to YouTube if you've done that, you can upload here. And once it's uploaded, so I uploaded all of our videos that are in our Canvas shell. And by the way, we're going to have to update all those links to these links once we have them captioned. So what's nice about uploading here is you can link directly to these videos like you would for YouTube, but you can also have them professionally captioned. So if you upload to YouTube, there's a way to have it auto-captioned. Don't do that, because the auto-captioning is terrible.
Right.
You can do it and then fix it, and that just takes a ton of time. But because our state is paid for this, don't do all that work. So I've uploaded it. Go to details and options. Oh, and I should mention, when you upload a video, it takes some time. So the workflow I have is I upload it, and then the next day I come back and do this, because it takes a few hours to actually upload. So you can't do it.
A few hours.
I think so.
Okay, no, that's good to know, right?
I remember the uploading took forever, and then the captioning takes, I think it says a few days. So this is a slow process, but it's fast in between the wait times. So,
Then,
yes,
by college account, you mean just the email?
the Butte email. Use your Butte email. Don't use a personal email because it won't link properly. So, details and options. And then submit this media for captioning. Okay. And it does have a little note here about please make sure this is something you actually want captioned. You're not just practicing or whatever.
Yeah, Chris was sure to tell us that. We heard a little bit about this before. Chris Palmerini was like, please don't screw around with that.
Yes,
That's something you really will use.
because it's pricey apparently, and they will have to pay for it. So yeah, you put in the length, the course number, and that's it. And then you click submit. And I don't know if it says here, but it had the turnaround time was fairly long because there it is, 3 to 5 business days. Because some person has to do this, like some professional person is doing this. And so it does take some time. But much easier than doing it yourself for sure. And free.
I think 3 to 5 days is very reasonable.
Yeah, it really is. So yeah, if you're putting any videos in your class, do that.
Well, why are you, I came in a little bit late here. Why are you choosing the curated accessible resources for Word?
Oh, that's just my videos. So these are videos from our Canvas shell that I need captioned.
Okay, that was just a title. Okay.
Yeah, so here's the, that was just the video title.
Okay.
But to get there, so under media, this is where you'd upload all your videos. Does that make, sorry, Mandy, am I going
No,
too
that's all
fast?
right. I'm just looking because I just registered, but I haven't yet got my email yet.
Oh, I got you. So you may not be able to get in. I think you have to click on my account first.
Okay.
But then here, and then when you've got the videos uploaded, it's under details and options that'll take you to the captioning.
And do those reside up there, or do you have to take them down afterwards, or?
So these are stored on their server, and you would link to this video just like you would, instead of linking to the YouTube, you link to this. It shouldn't go away, but there's also no reason that you can't. I think there's a way to also download. There it is. So download the video to have a backup. But yeah, this is the state has paid for this. And so if it goes away, we probably have bigger problems than lots of videos.
It's just that I quite often what I do is I actually have videos that are MP3, they're actually files, because I never know necessarily how good the internet is going to be working on campus at any particular point in time.
Yeah.
So I always like to have the actual movie file with me so that I can at least play on the computer, whether the internet's up or down. So.
And that might be a nice thing too for the students. So on the Canvas site, if you have the link to the to their video storage thing with the caption and everything, and you could also embed the video file itself so that if a student has really low bandwidth at home, they can download it. And I always love it because I have terrible bandwidth at home. So whenever I can download a video, that's so much better. So it's a nice thing to do for students too.
So it could be any video, like any YouTube video that we should.
No, these are your videos.
That we make at home.
That you make, yeah. The YouTube videos are not ours to move about with.
Okay.
This was just, we used to tell folks to upload to YouTube and caption. This is better.
Yeah, way better. So, okay, so your workflow, I just want to clarify, your workflow, because the upload takes so long, is you do the Camtasia screen capture, the Zoom, you use Zoom sometimes, you save it, you upload it, you go away for a day, and you come back.
Yeah, and I don't, I don't remember if it takes quite that long. It may just be a couple of minutes, but anything more than a few seconds, I've already lost my attention span.
Oh, okay. So, okay.
So I'm not sure how long, but I do know it was more than a few seconds.
Okay.
All right. I don't know. Does anyone online, Al, do you know how long the upload takes on this?
It depends on your bandwidth, but with 3C, you got to make sure that when you upload it to My Files, you refresh it occasionally, and then you have to, again, move that media and encode it to My Media, right? So there's that transitional process from uploading into the My Files section to the My Media section.
Oh,
right?
and I'd forgotten about that step. Okay.
Yeah, because a lot of people are like, well, where are my files? I can't link them. Well, they're probably still in files instead of media, right? So you haven't uploaded any into your files, or you've moved them over already.
Okay, so you upload them and they end up, if I'm understanding this correct, stop me if I'm wrong. So when you upload the video, it ends up here.
Right.
Under files, and then you move it to...
There'll be a little checkbox, and it'll probably say, encode this video. And so whatever format you uploaded it in, 3C will encode it into a format that they like, and then that file will then be available under your media tab, which is right next to files.
Once it appears under media, is it captioned or not quite yet?
It's not quite yet. So after it's in media, it's available for use. Then you go ahead and submit it for captioning. And that process takes about an hour, depending on their server load.
The files to media takes about an hour?
Yeah, the whole process from uploading the files to waiting for them to receive it, for them to re-encode it into the media section.
Do you see this L getting any faster in the next year or two?
I can't speak to that.
All right.
Although I do want to give a shout out to Rob Newman in the chat, who asked, what if we already have a script for the video? That's a great question. Suzanne, do you know if you use Cadet or YouTube Captions as a way to work with a transcript? How do you guys use it at your campus?
You know, we haven't really gotten that into it, so we're just starting to learn about it.
Mm-hmm. I find that, I mean, you can do the captions in Camtasia, but I find that interface a little unwieldy. No offense to Camtasia, they have a great product, not necessarily for captions in that particular portion. What I like to use is either upload to YouTube's own your own site, just have an unlisted video and use their captioning interface, or use Cadet, which is available for free from the National Center for Accessible Media at WGBH or NCAM. So Cadet is a piece of software that if you have a plain text file, right, not a Microsoft Word document, right, but just a plain text file, and you space out your script, right, with a space in between each line, it'll import that into Cadet, and then it'll timecode the transcript into a caption file, which then you can upload yourself to 3C and make your own captions. Did that answer your question, Rob?
Could we have the information about Cadet one more time, please?
Yeah, the Cadet it stands for a Caption and Description Editing Tool, and you can get that at NCAM, that's N as in Nancy, C as in cat, A as in apple, M as in Mary, .wgbh.org. Or you can just search Google for it.
And Elle, if you could include that in the list of resources that we could post, that'd be great.
For sure, for sure.
You know, and I wonder, and this is just a question following up on Rob's, if I had, say, a Word file that had my script for the video, when I asked 3C Media to caption it, could I send them that, do you suppose, and say, here's something that'll make it easier for you?
Yeah, what you can do is you can if you pull up a file that needs to be captioned, I'm sure you'll have one in there somewhere.
Yes, because I am lagging on these, yes.
Well, even if you have a caption, it gives you an option to recaption it.
Oh.
So if you submit this media for captioning, you scroll down all the way to the bottom, you'll see the transcriber's notes. If you post the transcript in there as a plain text, just straight text, not as a Word document, that'll suffice for a transcript. And then 3C will actually use that to make your captions.
Nice.
So that's another good way to, if you're not familiar with Cadet, or any kind of other captioning tool, you can upload those captions and still make use of that transcript.
Ooh, other questions? And then the last, since we have a second, I just want to show you one more cool little toy that we got with Canvas recently is Yeah, is an accessibility checker, which is, Elle mentioned absolutely right. This is not like it'll tell you you're fine and then you're good to go, and don't worry about it. But it's a nice little thing to look at, and that's this little person here. If you click on that, it kind of tells you if there's any errors that you've missed. So it's a good place to start, and it's right there. But certainly not the end, just the beginning of the process. Anything else?
If I could just add one last thing, Suzanne.
Please.
I just want to give a shout out when you're taking advantage of your resources, including the community with the listserv. And please take advantage of that, or the Commons, or the PLN when it gets up and running. There's also some great people out there working on the CTC degree, our vendors, the High Tech Center Training Unit, which is going to be doing accessibility training. I know Geyer Dietrich is instrumental in doing that. You could reach out to her. You could also reach out to the folks at the Community College Consortium for Open Educational Resources. Folks like Una Daly or James G.G. will definitely point you in the right direction as far as locating those OER resources and doing some accessibility, not necessarily evaluations of your content, but pointing you in the right direction for making sure the content that you're going to be using is going to support student success through universal design.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, there are a lot of places to get help when you start getting stuck. Awesome. Well, thank you, Elle. I can't tell you how glad I am that you were able to come share with us. That is really awesome. I really, really appreciate it.
Not a problem. I'm glad I could power through with the minimum of coughing. I'm really kicking down the Ricola here. If anybody works for Ricola, this is your official plug. So please send more my way. Yeah, I'm happy to help, and thank you, Suzanne, for putting this event on. I know that's very helpful for folks who are either thinking about starting the process or deep in the middle of making their own or adapting OER for their classes. You're doing important work out there.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And I will talk to you soon. I'm sure we'll see each other at a conference at some point.
That sounds great. And I'll go ahead and shoot out those resources to you post haste.
Thanks. I appreciate it. All right, and if there are no questions online, I think I'm going to stop the recording and somehow stop the recording. Hold on.